the educational institutions being held accountable. And I don't hear the religious or spiritual institutions being held accountable. And I don't hear the cultural institutions being held accountable. I cannot speak for the rest of the United States, but I can speak for New York. We have a lot of people who wear cultural clothing, but they are wearing cultural clothing, I sometimes think, because they don't want to be identified black. It's ordinary black person. They're running away from what it means to be black. So I'm wondering if this is the case from your perspective in Jamaica and in England. Do you see the same thing? The absolute absence of the churches in New York City has gotten to the point where Bloomberg bought them all off in the last election. Okay? And the charter school movement in New York City, which is pushed by Obama, is really a movement to destroy the legacy of the Black Reconstruction Congress, which was for free public education.
Holding the education system to account is not an easy matter, and it has to happen at a whole set of levels. You have to organize primarily parents and others in real communities to impact schools and school practice around exclusion, that's to say expulsion of kids, around curriculum and so on. And then there's other stuff that has to happen at a higher up level, and some of those battles have been lost and are being lost left, right and centre, no doubt here, and are certainly being lost in the UK. This particular moment is one in which the white capitalist state is using white racist nationalism as a way of, or the basis on which to reorganize the education system. The other thing that's happening is that they're reorganizing it so that money can be made out of it by corporations who run schools, just as they reorganize the prisons so that money can be made out of them by the people who run prisons, the prison industrial complex that Angela wrote about and so on. So all of those things are happening, and it's a complex moment. And I don't pretend to have the answer, but what is needed, amongst the things that are needed, a real effective local organization mobilizing parents in relation to particular schools and educational authorities, and then at the national level there needs to be a national leadership that's capable of conducting a national dialogue with whoever fixes policy at the national level, so that racism isn't, that our kids aren't in day-to-day confrontation with a racist education system, that needs to be addressed. In respect of the churches, it seems to me that you put a certain clarity to it. I come out of the Christian religion up until about 18, probably from 18 to 14, as really intending to be a Baptist minister. So I know the whole story, like the back of my hand. But having said that, I think that Christianity and Islam come to us as religions of the oppressor. That is undoubtedly a fact. And then we have to recognize that there are two ways of using them, and they have been used. Let me leave Islam out of it. Christianity has been used historically in two ways. Either as something of a tool of liberation, or a tool in the liberation process. One of the reasons why that has happened is that the system tended to take its eye off the religious leaders until it was too late. By the time they realized that the religious leader was a revolutionary, the revolution had sometimes already started. So religion provided a space of mobilization. If you look at Jamaican history, from maybe the 1780s right through to 1865 and beyond, all of those uprisings were led by religious people. Sam Sharp and Paul Bogle being the most. So the religion of the oppressor can be used in liberatory ways. Or it can be used as part of the process of self-oppression, where you don't bother with struggle here, where you think that that story in the Bible about Adam's sons and grandsons is a curse upon us, and that that what we're going through is really the curse of Canaan. That what we're going through is evidence of that curse, where we have a whole set of, what should we call them, accommodationist, there are worse words for them, where the state facilitates a whole set of religious leaders because they're not making any waves, because they run projects that are hand in glove with the police, because they don't challenge the system. They simply take the money, enrich themselves, do a little work, and go about their business. So that no doubt is happening here, and that's happening there. The question is, what is the politics of the religious leader? Not what is the spirituality, what is the politics? Is the religious leader part of the liberation struggle or in bed with the enemy? That's the only question you have to ask, right? And that's the way you clarify our relationship with them. I think the same thing applies to the merchants of alleged Pan-African and African culture, right? African culture can be used in all kinds of reactionary ways, and is used in all kinds of reactionary ways. The people who claim to be culturalists, who say that, talk about class is rubbish, who focus on Marxist racism, all of those culturalists are enemies of the people, enemies of black people, enemies of African people, right? We as Africans need to understand our culture, know its riches, know that it's the equivalent and sometimes better than almost any other culture that you can mention, have an enormous, reservoir of riches to tap into and mobilize. And those of us who are serious activists need to have a politics that is about class and race and gender liberation. And they have to go hand in hand in a serious kind of way. And whenever we meet people who are saying race first and race only, we have to say to those people that you're wrong. How come you're fighting Marxism and class more than you're fighting capitalism? Something wrong with your line. Yeah? And so that is where I stand, and that's how I handle it, and that's how I recommend that we handle it. Yes, ma'am.
Is there substantial movements in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean that reflect the influence of Cuba and the growing movement away from capitalism or the U.S. hegemony in countries like Venezuela and Bolivia and so forth?
Right. I think a lot of people in the world know that Cuba is important and that what's happening in Cuba is important, and that break with imperialism has benefited ordinary people in Cuba, and through the spread of Cuban influence and sometimes military power has contributed to liberation processes. A lot of ordinary people know that. So that is one thing. In the English-speaking Caribbean, apart from the knowledge that Cuba is important and the willingness of people, all kinds of people, to say that what we really need in Jamaica is a Castro or Cuban type revolution. Whole heap of people will say that. But the truth of the matter is that right now you have, and it may be too pessimistic, but right now you have in Jamaica the hegemony, big Marxist word, the control really of the place by two big reactionary blocs, the PNP and the JLP. They're in bed with criminals and all kinds of things. The analysis that I partially gave earlier is true. And the people who are not in that hegemony don't see a way forward. So a whole set of people, my ex-wife had a thing about the now vote party, the people who are not voting because there's nothing to be gained from either side. And there has been no effective mobilization of a middle. And the work of attempting to do that is extraordinarily difficult. It's difficult because the Caribbean went through a real set of difficulties in the 70s and 80s. The civil war that the US and the Jamaican ruling class imposed on the Jamaican people has left its effects. In the following decade, the disaster in Grenada has left its effects. The fall of world socialism and the crisis of Marxism has left its effects, and it's a long story. So trying to organize for progressive politics in Jamaica, it's a place that I tried it, and I'm still trying it, is really very difficult. So the movement that I was in, no matter how we tried, never got beyond 4 or 6 or 10, right? And you call a demonstration, and very few people come, and some of them who come want you to give them money for coming, to go back home or whatever, right? Because they have been trained in a dependency politics where if you're calling a demonstration, you must be a big man of that type, and you must have money to make the thing run. And so there are all of those difficulties. So I would say, and it seems to me that that is also true in the other places to a greater or less extent. So the way forward is this: continue to organize or seek to organize on a principled basis. Know that the people are, to use a phrase, catching their arse, having a really hard time. Times are growing harder and harder in all of those places. I left Jamaica for about a year, and I went back, and the prices were notably astronomical. The government was getting ordinary people to pay for the crisis by upping taxation, all kinds of machinations, just as the new British government is doing. The Jamaican government got into that before the actual British government, with all of those cuts and tax rises and stuff. So you've got to continue to move on the most principled basis. You've got to forward the analysis of the failure of capitalism, of the nature of imperialism, of the nature of racism. You've got to hope that people are listening, and that if and when the people move, and they could move any time, our region has a history of organized spontaneity. All of those great moments were moments of organized spontaneity in which nobody quite organized it in the way that it came out. And what you have to hope, me personally, that because you've appeared to be principled, that you can have a place in the movement, and the people will recognize you as somebody with something to say and somebody with leadership potential or whatever. Yes, sir.
The most pernicious of racist, unjust acts are brought about by the concept of the double standard. And we can analyze all of these suggestions, all of these possibilities, all of these struggles for liberation on the basis of the double standard. There is one standard for a group of people here and another standard for the group of people there. Whatever happened to self-defense and self-determination that we must put in the minds of all of those people who seek liberation instead of dancing around it? Self-defense and self-determination is what I learned all of my life, and then suddenly somebody says self-defense might be bad, self-defense might be adventurous, self-determination in terms of schools or someplace else. We have to start with ourselves first. So I would suggest humbly that all over the world, those people who speak about changing things begin to change their own mind and change the people's minds around them with the original self-defense and self-determination, and never mind any other religious, political, notorious, loving, and I'm talking about the Martin Luther King syndrome, I'm talking about the cultural Obama syndrome, that we have to begin to think for ourselves, about ourselves, and with ourselves, with the unspeakable words, self-defense, self-determination. Thank you.